So I wanted to share some of the wisdom that I had to gain myself over the last few years in working on a publication, which is a calculus book. It's published by Pearson. It was released the summer of 2010 in two forms. There was a print version of the text. Some of you may have actually seen the print version somewhere. It's got a blue cover on it. There are really 4 authors on the project. There are 2 names on the cover, which is Bill Briggs, who's the lead author, and he's at the University of Colorado in Denver. He lives in Boulder. Lyle Cochran was the second person to join the team, and Lyle teaches at Whitworth University in Spokane, up in my part of the country. Bernard Gillette was the third member to join the author team. He teaches at University of Colorado Boulder. And then I joined the team in 2008 to bring to life the new ebook that we created for it. And there's a little bit of a story I can share with you as to how I got on the team and how I got connected, and that is I've been doing a lot with Mathematica and visualizations in my classroom for many years. There's a few demonstrations that I have online, been doing some workshops. Anyway, word got out that I like to create a lot of visuals, and the editor of the Calc project, his name Bill Hoffman, was down in Texas. He eventually caught wind of it and had Lyle Cochran from Spokane drive down to Walla Walla and spend an afternoon with me to see if I knew what I was talking about before he flew from Texas up. To be honest, he flew up to Walla Walla to talk me into doing something that I said no to. And that is, he flew up to talk me into building a set of visualizations that would supplement the text. That is, Pearson would have these 20-some, 30, 40 figures, I don't know how many. It would be like a mini demonstration site. So if a college was going to adopt the text and they would have access to all these figures, that would sort of bring Newton's method or the derivative sort of up in front of the students. That's why he came to Walla Walla. And when he sort of gave me that pitch, I said, no, I'm not interested in doing that. There's a lot of good stuff that's out right now. There's the Wolfram demonstration site, there's Java applets, etc. And it was my feeling as an educator that those resources were not being utilized as good as they could by students. And the feeling that I had is I'm the faculty member, I know the calculus, I look at the picture, I get excited, I understand the intricacies and the relationships of everything going on there. Maybe you guys do too. But then put yourself in the seat of a student. And a student who doesn't know the relationships. When we build the figures and don't have the scaffolding of text that's around the figures, is there enough information there for the student to really learn something? Or are they just going to say, well, this is kind of cool, maybe not cool, and move on? And so I had said no, and that's when I planted in the editor's mind the vision of what I wanted to do for the ebook, which was to bring the entire thing alive and fill it with figures. Now, some of the mundane parts of that story, and some of you may have already heard this, is you got to create content if you want to write a book. How many have written a book? It's a labor of love, isn't it? Okay, so on this project there's 4 authors, and I'm thankful for that. All the narrative text within the printed book and the ebook primarily goes through Bill Briggs' hands. I mean, he's the voice that speaks to the students. And so I knew to build this ebook that I wanted to, I was very thankful that I didn't have to write all that content to begin with, because what I wanted to do is speak in pictures. You with me? And the team that I joined understood the value of the written word plays one role, but the visual picture as a storyteller plays another role that's just as important. And it's really the connection of those. All right? So, but I will say you have to create content if you want to write a book. And I do want to point out the writing assistant, because I was going to share some of the wisdom that I've gained. Even though I created that writing assistant, I have to tell you that throughout the entire process of creating the ebook, when I had a section of material to create, I had 2 palettes open on my screen. One was the writing assistant. I seem to use that continually throughout the entire process, and I'll show you some of the reasons why. The second one was a palette that I developed specifically for building the ebook. And I have some inspiration for that second palette, and I'll show you that second palette before we're done today. So this is a quiz for those of you here today. Could you, very quickly with the writing assistant palette, create content like that? Where you have some text, you have some math, you have some display math, if you will, lined up on the equal sign. And then even more than that is some annotations over on the side. And for those that have tried to do a bit of typesetting in Mathematica, One of the things that's critical about these annotations on the side is they are, do you notice the alignment there? They're left aligned. That's kind of important. You don't want them centered. So if you want to write a book, one of the things that I found very valuable was to really master what was sitting in that writing assistant palette so that when I had something like this to create, I could do it very quickly. You want a quick little demo as to how to build that structure? Okay. So my answer is yes, you can do it. So I'll pull up the writing assistant, put it over on the side, and I'll bring in I have to make a choice here. Either I can do an equal symbol aligned math cell, which is what I'll go ahead and start with. And I can do theta is equal to S divided by R. To get a second column, it's like a matrix. So control comma gets me a second column. And then I'll say for any circle. Control enter gets me a new line. Theta is equal to S for a unit circle. So that was fairly straightforward, but I have a problem, right? What's the problem? I don't have the alignment fixed. So the way that the writing assistant palette works is it puts in a grid structure that's set up to line up on the equal sign. So there's two ways I can finish this problem off, and it depends on whether I want to show you some of the underlying code. How many have looked at expressions underneath a cell? Okay, so let me take that route first, and then I'll show you another route where you wouldn't have to do this. So I'll select the cell, I'll expose the underlying structure, and I don't want to spend a lot of time on it, but I'm noticing right down in here there's grid box alignment, and it says columns, and it's saying line up on the equal sign. I have two columns. I want the first column lined up on the equal sign. The second column I want left aligned. So I'll simply go right in there without changing too much and just put left in there. And now I have left alignment. Okay? Now there's another way to pull that off, which I want to demo just for the fun of it. And I'm going to choose the marker aligned math cell. Theta is equal to S divided by R for any circle. Theta is equal to S for a unit circle. Okay, now on the alignment marker, you get to pick where the structure is aligned. And if you leave your mouse on the alignment marker entry, or on the marker aligned math cell, you'll see down here a little reminder as to how you can put the alignment marker, escape, AM, escape. So I will come in here and I'll put in an alignment marker, escape, AM, escape. I'll highlight it, copy it, go down, and just move around, and I get my left alignment without having to expose the underlying code. So the marker alignment is very important, especially if you're going to deal with inequalities or textual material or multiple columns. Okay? The other thing I learned, this was the bad news, and I've shared this in the past. One of the things I had to do to create the ebook is I had to retype the entire book in Mathematica. That's 1,100 pages of textual material. Now, I learned really quickly I want some keyboard shortcuts. And the keyboard shortcuts that are built into Mathematica aren't good enough once you get into your own writing, because you want your specific structures to be replicated by some keys. Okay? So to create your own keyboard shortcuts, and let me just give an example. If I was writing along, let me go back into a text cell. And suppose I was doing something like evaluate, and I wanted a limit right now. Okay? I actually wanted to create a structure like what you see down here. Right? So I've got the LAM, I have an underscript, I've got something else going on. I'm going to actually type SLIMU, and when I spaced out of that, I should probably do that again so that you saw it. SLIMU. This is a keyboard shortcut I define, and I've got some code here to show you how to define your own. As soon as I space away from it, it gets replaced with the limit structure that I want. And then I hit Tab, and I just move through the blanks and fill them in. Okay? Now, there's something else that happened on that particular limit structure that those of you who have done some typesetting in Mathematica want to appear on a regular basis when you put limits in, or maybe integrals, or maybe summations. Anybody notice what it is? No? Maybe I just won't say anything yet. Right here. Where do you often find the x going to 1 when you put in a structure? A limit structure? Maybe over to the, let's see, it's to your right, and a little bit low, not directly underneath. Same thing happens on summation signs. They're not always directly above and below the sigma. Remind me before the hour's out, I'll tell you how to fix that if you want them to appear directly below. Okay? So to do your keyboard shortcuts, this is just a small sampling of the ones that I've defined for myself. But it's, I can use the set options command. I'm going to do this for the front end session, which is just while I happen to be live. I probably should, well, I have a note down at the bottom. If you want it to be active throughout your front end, every time you open the front end, you can just change that first argument. But the keyboard shortcuts are a listing of the strings that you want to type that hopefully make sense for you. I have some of my own mnemonic devices. For instance, all my shortcuts, this is really not slimy. That's not what I'm thinking of here. But I start my shortcuts with S, and then for shortcuts usually, and then I continue it with some sort of structure. So this is a limit, and I want things appearing underneath. Or if I did the SVBR, that's a shortcut for vector brackets. Okay? So if I evaluate that, all these shortcuts become live. SR2, anybody recognize what's going to happen on the SR2? Hey, there's a way to figure out what to put for these shortcuts. Let me show you that real quick. So suppose I'm typing along and I say the plain SR2 space out of that. Right, so I get my nice double struck R and the superscript 2. So let's imagine that you're looking at a structure that you want to be a keyboard shortcut for yourself. Right? You can simply create what you want in a cell, expose the underlying cell structure, copy and paste it right in here. So I could just create my SR2, then I'm just going to go in, grab my cell, which goes about that far, roughly, copy it, go down into my input auto replacement, paste it in, define whatever shortcut I want to go with it. Okay? All right, so keyboard shortcuts I found to be key. I don't mind peeking behind the scenes when I have a structure that I want to build into a shortcut to grab it. Okay, keyboard shortcuts I found useful, but that's not all. This was critical for me in the beginning of this project because I knew when I started building the ebook it was going to be sent out over the web. We started with the Mathematica player. It's now the CDF player that is what it interacts with. But every little file that goes out, every individual file is self-contained. For the ebook, I had to create a custom style sheet. Okay? So for the look and feel of the ebook, there's a style sheet associated with that. In the deployment mode we're imagining, which is every file is self-contained, that means every file has to contain what? It has to contain the private styles. Okay, how many of you worked with the styles? All right. So if you imagine that you're going to create a book and it's got hundreds of files and every file has its own style sheet in it, okay, which is what's the case on this ebook, you better figure out real quick, how are you going to update all the style sheets? Because if you make one change later in the process, the font needs to be a different color because the designer said that, or there needs to be more space, or you need a new style. Believe me, you do not want to sit there and open up hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of files and copy and paste it. So very early on, I created a tool that would push out private style sheets into all these notebooks. I just click a button and it does it all. All right? And I want to give you sort of a demo as to how you can pull this off yourself. There is my presentation notebook in there. There's a folder called TC Sample, standing for Tech Conference Sample. If you look in TC Sample, I included a few files. I included C5S1.NB, C1S1 support, C2S2, well, you guys can see the name of it. And there's a notebook in there that's called the TC Style Sheet Notebook. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up the TC Style Sheet Notebook. I'm going to make changes to the styles. I'm going to make some modifications, all right? Then I've got some code which will simply open up that style sheet notebook, grab the style definitions out of that, and then one by one open up the first 4 files on that list and push the styles into those files. I mean, it could be 4 files or it could be a whole bunch of files. All right? So let's open this up. There's not a lot of content here except the style sheet. And let me go into the style sheet. These are a few styles, and I think we ought to change one of them. So I'll magnify that a little bit. This is a definition cell. Okay? So it has a frame around it that's sort of a brownish color. Let's change that. So I'm going to go to my palettes menu. I'm going to open up the writing assistant, and I'm going to change the frame. I want the frame around that to be red, and I want it to be really thick. Okay, this is a change I'm making in the style sheet. All right? So I'll close that down, close down my style sheets. I'm going to save it. Okay, now, if I open up, this is Chapter 5, Section 1. This is a new book project that I'm working on. But you'll see there's a definition right here at the beginning that has that brown frame around it, because it has the style sheet in it, which is the old style sheet, not the new one. You with me? Okay, so let's close that down. Okay, so the first command I'm going to evaluate there, I happen to call update style sheet. Okay, and hopefully I commented enough and allowed you to read it. It's going to look in the current notebook directory, which is where the presentation notebook is, right? And then it's going to look in a given directory. It's going to open a notebook, which is going to be the TC style sheet notebook. It's going to extract the style definitions, store it here locally, then it's going to close that file down. Then I'm going to go grab the Chapter 5 section notebooks, and we'll just sit back and watch it here. So I want to update the style sheet. Okay, so it opened 4 notebooks. Now I'll open Chapter 5, Section 1. And the style for that definition cell was updated. Okay? Now I take the essence of that command that I just showed you, and I use that on a regular basis, and it's applied to how many files? Hundreds of files. I just sit back and let it do its work. Okay? But that's one of the things I had to learn from this project is style sheets have to be embedded because things go out individually. You can't use a shared style sheet. So as a designer, you have to have some way of making sure things get updated as you change them. Okay? How many of you make palettes of your own? Not many hands. How many of you have never seen the ebook? Maybe I should have. I'm going to have to go show you the ebook, aren't I? We need to see the ebook. Okay, so I'm going to show you sections of the ebook that are live in the CDF player. Okay, the ebook is distributed from Pearson's MyMathLab website. I'll click over here on the interactive ebook button, and then we'll go into Chapter 3, and I'll go into Section 1, and then I'll click on my first link up there. You see the interactive ebook, and then while we sit here, that will be downloaded. It doesn't take that long. The CDF player fires up, and let's go back. Okay, so now we're looking at a live section of the ebook. This is exactly the same as my students are seeing, and I should have said something at the beginning. This is our second fall with this ebook out in the market at the college level, and I think in the U.S. this fall we have 300 colleges teaching with this book across the U.S. And I don't know how many students, but it's over 50,000. I don't know if we're pushing 100,000, but fairly high volume. And I'll take you back and show you in Pearson's website, they have something called a browser check that the students click on. If they don't have the CDF player, they download it and install it. Okay? Once they've done that, this is their ebook. Now some of the features with the ebook, I'll go ahead and magnify it in the back. I should have started here. You guys will forgive me, won't you? Okay. So as I'm cruising through it, I deliver the ebook in what I call outline view. So if a student wants to start exploring it and reading pieces, they do have to do some clicking. but I'll show you how they can do the click. Now if you're a Mathematica user, you're going to come in here and you're going to click on that little teeny tiny triangle off on the side. My students aren't Mathematica users. They become that. They just click. So if you just click on the words, you don't have to click on the little triangle. Okay? You click on the words, it opens up the material, they move through, they see figures go by. I'm going to go ahead and stop on one. Here's a figure that looks kind of interesting. And you know, if they're reading the text prior to the figure, there's a reference to this particular figure down below. You know, go look at figure 3.3, so they'll come down, they'll look at it, they'll do things with it, and then all the words to support what that figure is trying to tell a student appear above and below. And when I started off with, that's what I said about the scaffolding. Figures, I don't think, need to live on their own for educational purposes. They need to be surrounded by the material to support the student. Okay, so as you keep going, there's some definitions, etc. Now for navigation within the notebook, this is something I was going to talk about before the hour is out. In the upper left, if I click on the little section 3.1 button that you might see up there, you will see all the tagged items within the notebook. So if I open it up and I immediately want to go to example 7, I can go down the list to example 7, and I can bring up example 7 and look at the graph, look at that particular example. Now that example asks the student to graph the derivative of a function. They can click on the button. There's a little suggestion as to what they should be thinking about as that little tangent line segment goes across. Okay? But another pedagogical decision I made as I built the book is every example is followed by a solution, but the solution is not visible until you do what? So you'll see right down below the example is the solution. You can scroll down. You're not seeing the content. You just have to click on it. I wanted that sort of discovery, if you will. So the student drills in and is working their way through it. Now, I'm going to blow by all the textual content, and then I'm just going to go to the figure itself. And this one, there's a few more controls on it. I want to draw G prime. I'll go ahead and just watch it. The annotations are going to change as I'm moving across the x-axis. Okay? You guys have seen how many figures so far in the ebook? I think I just went by 2 or 3 of them. This book is filled with 650 interactive figures. Every last one of them start with manipulate. I wrote every last one of them. All the different controls. The code, the figure was written specifically to fit into the scaffolding text that's all around it. Okay? They're not isolated little islands. Some of them, as long as we got in here, let me go up to something that's kind of fun. Well, that's not fair. These are all fun. But let me go show you a 3-dimensional one. That was a pretty quick delivery, wasn't it? I mean, these things are coming live. So let me talk about directional derivatives. The other feature of this book is, well, the other role that it's playing in classes is these figures were made to take up quite a bit of the screen. That was on purpose. So many of the faculty that are using this book in the country right now will be going to the ebook. They'll be opening up a figure, and they'll be teaching from the figure without reading the text, knowing the students can look at the text later on, which has all the supporting stuff. Okay? So yes, there's nice 3-dimensional things with controls and a variety of other moving around, grids. Okay? So, any issues about the ebook itself? It's delivered online. It's a CDF document. Every single file is CDF. Once I'm within a section, I can move anywhere within that section just by clicking on a navigation item. When I come into the section, if I want to see the entire section, there's a button right below 14 up there which puts the book into expanded mode, and you can just scroll from beginning to end. You can print if you so wanted to print. There are, let me show you real quick quizzes. So we added the quick quiz, or I added the quick quiz last winter. The idea here is you're at the end of the section, you're not ready to start the exercises, so can you present to the students some very, very quick questions to see if they're on track. Now they're here for 2 reasons. One is for students that are trying to validate their knowledge. The other is for the faculty member who might be using this in a large lecture hall where their students all have access to what? Clickers. Okay? So I could pull up question 1, the rate of change of that function at the point 21 in the direction of, and let's see, I pick my answer and it says, nope, that's not right, just with a red X. No. Okay. Now these are not tied into a grade book directly because that was not my goal. I just wanted self-validation questions, and I wanted a way for faculty members to use it in the classroom if they had clickers or wanted some inputs. Okay. Now, some of my students, this fall, I teach calculus, Calc 1, to about 30-some students. This fall, I think all but 5 of them bought only the electronic access to the book. So this is their only book. I had about 5 students from my memory that actually wanted the printed book to go along with it. Last year, it was almost all of them bought the printed book, not that many bought, just the ebook. Those that did buy the printed book last year, by the time winter quarter came around, they were scratching their head wondering why they bought the print book, because they weren't looking at it anymore. All right, we're in that transition right now. Now, exercises. So if I go into the exercises, I'm still in the ebook. These exercises are exactly the same as what's in the print book. So if you're teaching from the print book and you give a student an assignment, if they have the ebook, they have everything here. So the thing about the homework here, and the reason I didn't have to worry about it, is within Pearson itself, within the Course Compass website, Pearson built about 7,000 algorithmically generated assignable items. So those are homework questions, so they build questions based upon ones we have in the book. They're generated via algorithms. Students have help, they have assistance. As they go through that, they don't see answers, they actually evaluate whether they're right or wrong. I could go through that for those of you who are interested some other time, but I wanted to stay on the ebook. So now you've seen the ebook. Should I get back to some of the code? Okay, I'm sorry about that. My oversight. I'm so focused on, what are you going to do to build one? All right, well, we talked about the keyboard shortcuts if you want to write a lot of stuff, and you have some samples of that. We talked about updating a style sheet if you want to do that. Building a palette. There's some code in there. I do build a lot of palettes, so I have a button up there for an annotation font. And if I was writing, I would be doing something like this. Like if that text that I just highlighted, I want to be annotation, I would click on a button and all of a sudden it would take on that cell style. Okay. The definition boxes, if I want a definition box while I'm writing, I'll click on a button and it inserts a definition box and I start typing into it. Those are things as a writer you're going to want access to save your time. Some of the other things that I wanted to share with you would be keeping the narrative, content, and code separate. What I found from writing is my mind is in one mode when I'm writing code. My mind is in a different mode when I'm writing textual content, and I don't like them to mix. Now granted, on the calculus book, the textual content was already done, but I'm starting a new project right now for Pearson, which is a pre-calc book, and writing it from scratch, doing the writing and the figures and everything else. All right, so I like to keep them separate. So let me demo for you what I do. I have these cells, I have these commands, create figure cell, create table cell, and create image cell. And then I have other commands for opening sections, closing sections, a variety of other stuff. And now if I want to open a file, I would do say open section 5.1. So my section is now open, it's ready to go. If I wanted to work on the support file, and you could do this from the file menu as well, but there's a reason I wanted to do this. So let me open the support file. I don't have a lot of code in that one. Let me open 5.2 where I have more code. Okay, so here that first chunk of code produces that table. Okay, so I write the tables from the code. Then the second bunch of code creates a figure, a manipulate, if you will, that I can move around. Okay, but in this notebook is just code. Let me open the textual content. So over in my narrative, here it may be a little bit small, but just preceding that figure, you see a command up there that says create figure cell. Okay, so I will simply evaluate everything in my code notebook, and then over in my narrative, even if these weren't here, I would simply evaluate them. It just sucks it in from that other file. And I'm able to keep them separate, and I'm not in the coding mode when I'm writing. And I'm not in writing mode when I'm coding. Okay? Now, I actually highlighted things and evaluated them, but you don't need to do that. If you think about building these commands, here is a table command that's going to run something called evaluate section. And just automatically, it's going to open up all the support files, evaluate the entire notebooks, and open up the narratives, and everything gets sucked in automatically. Okay? Automation is the key here. So let me close this. Well, we'll just leave that up. Now, some folks like having code where they write, so I will show you a very quick demo of a palette. There's a small palette that's just created up in the upper right corner. You guys see the palette? There's two buttons on it. It says what? Hide input, show input. Okay? So if I open a file that has a lot of code in it, so this is sort of the narrative that has code and a picture and then more code. I don't like all that, so I just click a button that says hide input. So now all the input is hidden. I click a button that says show the input code, and it's back again. It helps me as a writer, focus in on writing rather than highlighting and selecting stuff individually. Got a few minutes left. We are enough time. Let me talk a little bit about navigation. So when I showed you the ebook section, there's a little button up there that you can click on and all the items are listed. Okay? How do you create that? It's based upon the cell tags. How many of you have used cell tags in a notebook? Okay? So I select my cell. I make a cell tag that's descriptive. I think we ought to do that on one here. So here's a 5-1, and let me put a new cell in here. Well, I'll just add the cell tag to radian measure. So cell, tags, and let me add remove a cell. So I'm going to take away radian measure, and I'm going to add another tag that's going to be called Eric Schulz's fun thing. Okay? Now, in Mathematica, it's showing you the tag above that cell. Let me come back into my presentation notebook. I gave you some code in here that's going to look through a cell or look through a notebook and find all the cells that have cell tags. And it's going to build a list of those tags and pointers to where they exist in the notebook. And then there's a command called build doc cell that you'll find in the notebook as well. And if I wanted to build the navigation for that notebook, down at the very bottom, build doc cell 5-1, it's parsing through, it's looking for all the cell tags, and then it put a little doc cell on the top. There's a little button over there, and there's Eric Schulz's fun thing. So that's my navigation items. I can pick anything on that list, and bam, go right there within the notebook. Okay, I think navigation within a notebook, if you're talking about a lengthy notebook, is key. Got to give ways for people to get to certain places. Notebooks have to be cleaned up. By clean up, I mean the following. There's a little palette in there, and let me load up my notebook. This is not a notebook I would send out to somebody. It has code in it, cell tags are visible, cell brackets are visible, it's not clean. So there's a little palette, and the code is in the presentation notebook. If I press the cleanup button, what you see is the cell brackets went away, the cell tags are no longer visible, and things are closed up and ready to go. Click the normal look, and things are back the way you had them. You need to automate that process. So let me close that down. Let me come back and show you how to automate it. And you can play around with this code if it's something that intrigues you. So there's a cleanup section. There's a cleanup code. Then I can evaluate the command. It's going to open that. It's going to actually build a doc cell. It's going to clean things up and save it out. Okay? What it just created there, you'll find in your sample folder, there's a folder called Clean Files, and there's one I just created called Clean C5S1, and it has a fresh doc cell. It's all ready to go. Open and close, click on things just by clicking on the words, open and close them. Okay? Now, in the little bit of time I have left, if you want access to the ebook to simply play around with it and see what's in there, I made that possible by creating a course in Pearson's MyLabs Course Compass site. There are directions here. You can go to the website, click on the student button, use this course ID. You'll join the course. You'll see the ebook over on the side, the interactive ebook. You'll be able to click on any of the sections. And the best I can do, because it's out of my hands right now, is Pearson gives anybody who does this 17 days of free access to anything they want, and then they expect some sort of code. But that will get you access to see any sections in calculus and maybe get some inspiration. Okay, thank you.